So overcoming denial. That was about clearing the boulder. Now what? When you can't go back because adversity has changed you forever and the path forward seems empty, what do? You build a brand new structure. You build a brand new life. But how the heck do you do that? Where do you start? One place to start is with observation. That's my second resilience lesson. Observe the situation. Now, in my weasel story, I caught my little friend because I observed its behavior. There's no way I ever would have come up with that idea for a successful trap if I hadn't spent all those time in the early morning hours just observing the weasel's behavior. Learning to observe ourselves, that's a critical skill for building resilience, for building new lives after adversity. The importance of self-observation has been recognized for millennia. It was the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, among others, who said, "Know thyself." My most profound, know myself moment came all the way back in 2001. It was about 2 years after my injury. And this is the observation that I can draw a straight line from this observation to the fact that I'm standing in front of you here today. And what I observed was there was this new desire in me that I wanted to use my hands to create, which was really strange because the old Carole cared nothing about using her hands to do things. This was all new Carole. There was this little voice inside me that was whispering, make something. No matter what challenge we face, I think we all have that little voice inside, that voice that whispers observations, that whispers self-knowledge to us, that guides us towards resilience. The little voice inside, it's a quiet voice. It's one that can't be heard when we're trying when we're living in the past, trying to get back to who we used to be. The little voice inside, it's a voice of the here and now, it's the present. It's a voice that can point us in a new direction. When I listened to that little voice inside me all those years ago that said, make something, that was the first time that I turned away from beating against the closed door of my old life and towards walking through the open new one. I think that's an important point, that it isn't enough just to observe our little voice inside. We have to act on it. Observation without action, it doesn't get us anywhere. I've learned that even the smallest actions can crack open new doors. The small action that I started out with was this paint by number. This was the first thing that I made. Because of my difficulties with fatigue and concentration and attention, I could only work on this thing for about 15 minutes at a time, that I'd be so exhausted I'd have to take a nap for a couple of hours. But I loved working on this. When I successfully finished this, it made me think, well, what else can I make? So I got into more kinds of crafts, including jewelry making and cross-stitching and photography. You'll see a series of my resilience-inspired photos at the end of this presentation. Our actions build on one another. That I don't think it matters where we start, what we start with, because once we take one action, even just one small action, more can follow, momentum builds, and resilience takes root. I think one of the reasons that the crafts worked so well for me is that they gave me an opportunity to experience success after I had failed over and over again to return to my old life. I can't stress enough how important it is for all of us to find something we can succeed at. After brain injury, many of us fail so often that it just sends our self-esteem, our self-confidence just plummeting towards rock bottom. When we can experience success, that can be like a shot of adrenaline that can help us move forward. The more success I observed myself having with these crafts, the more motivated I was to continue building my new life. I think this observation applies to so many situations and so many challenges. Start small, find success, and build on it. It was through the crafts that I also started to observe my sense of self returning. For a long time after my brain injury, I felt like my only identity was that of professional patient. All I had to talk about was my brain injury, everything that I had lost. Crafts gave me something else to talk about. They gave me another identity. I was a person who made things. By making gifts, I could give to others instead of always being on the receiving end of help. I participated in an art show at the rehab hospital where I was a patient. People actually bought my jewelry there, which was so rewarding to me. As part of my volunteering at that hospital, I taught other brain injury survivors how to make jewelry. That led me back to teaching, which has always been one of my core identities, and it's another way to give. I began to observe that I am more than just a professional patient. I can still be useful in the world. It's just different than it used to be. Getting outside oneself and finding ways to give to others, that builds resilience. In 2003, I participated in a workshop on creativity at the Maine Brain Injury Conference. As part of that workshop, I had my own table where I displayed my crafts. It was also my very first opportunity to speak publicly about my brain injury. My speech was all of 5 minutes long. I was so nervous, my knees shook the entire time that I was up there. Sharing my story in front of others, being vulnerable like that, it was a risk. But resilience doesn't build unless we're willing to take on some risk, unless we're willing to feel the fear and we choose to move forward anyway. Resilience grows when we break new ground, when we push our boundaries one small step at a time. When I spoke at that conference, it increased my self-esteem, my self-confidence. It showed me that there could be power in my story, that I could use what I had been through to help others. And even though I was so nervous giving that 5-minute speech, I had this overwhelming feeling of, I'm home. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I knew that speaking about brain injury was what I wanted to do. Sometimes when we're in the midst of the worst of adversity, it can seem like the steps we're taking, they are so small, they are so slow. It can seem like we're just not moving at all. But I've learned that over time, small and slow can grow into something big and unexpected. Here's how that concept has played out for me. It's now been 16 years since my first 5-minute knee-knocking speech about brain injury. In that time, I've gone from being part of panels, to giving short talks, to organizing workshops, to delivering keynotes. With help of friends, I'm now able to travel and give speeches like this one. This is my longest road trip speech. In 2010, my mentor and I founded the Maine-based survivor volunteer group, Brain Injury Voices. You can see the statistics of what we've accomplished together in 9 years. We're proof that brain injury survivors working together can make a huge difference by focusing on what we can do. It was by focusing on what I can do that I came to write a book, To Root and to Rise, Accepting Brain Injury. It took me 12 years to write this book, one small step at a time. It is a book and a workbook designed to help brain injury survivors move forward with new lives, which is the very definition of resilience that we're talking about today. The journey that led me to this moment talking to all of you, it began with an observation. It began with listening to that little voice inside me all those years ago that said, make something. Those words, make something, they're about so much more than just doing something with my hands. I didn't recognize this back then, but what I know now is that those words, make something, that they apply to make something out of tragedy, turn suffering into something meaningful. Now, I certainly did not choose to have a brain injury. None of us choose to have adversity visit our lives. But one thing we can choose is to make something meaningful out of it. Making meaning is another part of resilience. I'm choosing to do that as a brain injury speaker, a book author, and the leader of Brain Injury Voices. I never would have expected it, but through this I found my life's work. But there are so many other ways that we can make something out of adversity. It's about whatever brings a sense of purpose to your life. It could be time spent with family and friends, volunteering, creative pursuits, art, crafts, music, writing. It could be helping someone, caring for animals, tending a garden, devoting time to a spiritual practice. However it is that you choose to make meaning, the process begins with listening to your own little voice inside. It's time again to pause for our 15 seconds or so to think about the resilient strategies that I just covered and how these might apply to your own situation as a survivor, a caregiver, a professional. So I invite you to take a look at the questions on the screen and think about how this might apply to your own situation.